In the manhwa The Dragon King's Bride, we discover Lucina, a young woman whose life takes a dramatic turn due to the selfish actions of her stepmother. 10 years earlier, Lucina had saved a dragon, a pivotal moment that foreshadows her fate. The dragon was actually the formidable King Hakan of the Tayar nation. He invades Lucina's family estate a few years later. In a desperate attempt to save themselves, Lucina's stepmother offers her as a bride to Hakan, believing this will ensure their survival. The king asked for Lucina's hand in marriage without giving her much choice. She accepted because she wanted to live. This act sets the stage for Lucina's reluctant journey to the arid kingdom of Tayar, where she marries the seemingly brutal King Hakan. Against all odds, Hakan promises to take care of Lucina, but will he truly be able to? Lucina, now engaged to the fearsome Dragon King, fainted in a dramatic swoon after their extravagant wedding. Upon awakening, she found herself in a carriage, whisked away to the arid kingdom of Tayar, her heart racing with trepidation. Hakan, the king with fiery eyes, learned of her revival and suggested a pause for her to eat. Although Lucina claimed she wasn't hungry, the growls from her stomach betrayed her. Indignant at Lucina's humility, he raged against her mother for offering her to an old king. Hakan was astonished by Lucina's calmness. Why didn't she beg to return to her family? His anger simmered as he recalled the war with Brian that had cost him his beloved brother. He instructed Lucina to relax and eat before preparing for their wedding night, a moment when newlyweds must share their bed. Shocked by this bold revelation, Lucina attempted to grant him privacy by stepping outside, but Hakan firmly held her back. The tension soared as promises of tumultuous passion hung in the air. Hakan's bold proposal to share his room frightened Lucina, who couldn't help but shed tears. Shocked, Hakan informed her that the culture of his kingdom stipulated that fiancés share the same room and do not marry until the woman becomes pregnant. This declaration worsened the situation, and Lucina cried even more. Hakan asked her to calm down and stop crying. "Would you have preferred to be the wife of the old king you were promised to rather than be my wife?" he asked her. Lucina told him no, but admitted that she was afraid. Hakan understood Lucina's feelings and decided to sleep outside. Hakan joined his troop, who were shocked by his arrival. His companion, astonished by the king's kindness towards Lucina, insisted on the urgency of having an heir. The next morning, upon waking, Lucina decided to wash her face. She realized that her face was covered in pimples due to her allergy to the dye used to make her hair blonde. She thought to herself that if she left her face in this condition, there was a possibility that Hakan would not want to touch her. Lucina heard a noise, and in an instant, she found herself captured by bandits sent by her wicked stepmother. She overheard their conversation and absolutely did not want to be taken back to her family. A lightning-fast arrow struck one of the kidnappers. Shocked, they turned to see who had done it. The kidnappers now faced an enraged fiancé. Hakan told Lucina to close her eyes. With a movement as swift as a breath of wind, he brandished his spear and severed the head of the kidnapper holding Lucina captive. Lucina opened her eyes as soon as she heard Hakan's voice asking if she was okay. She realized that she was now safe, and that the man before her no longer frightened her. After his heroic rescue, Hakan was worried about Lucina, who was trembling like a leaf. Now feeling safe, Lucina allowed Hakan to untie her knots. He apologized for his delay, and Lucina, filled with joy, nestled against him. She thought to herself that she would much rather stay with Hakan than return to her family. Hakan then gave orders for Lucina to get warm and change her clothes. Alone in the tent, Lucina realized that her pimples were worsening, making it seem as if she had a serious illness. She wanted to heal herself, thinking it wouldn't be so bad to fall asleep next to Hakan. Suddenly, she was stopped by a voice telling her not to heal herself. It was Fuka, the forest elf. Lucina joked by calling Fuka a little elf who makes it rain if he isn't offered peanuts. Surprised to see Lucina speaking so freely, Fuka asked why she had been as silent as a carp since yesterday. He told her he had been watching her because he sensed an energy he had never seen in the lands of Tayard. Fuka asked Lucina if she had a healing gift. She replied that she did. Fuka then shouted at her not to use her magic randomly because she would be in danger if someone caught her in the act. Healing magic was a rare ability coveted by all tribes. Fuka asked again why she hadn't said much yesterday. Lucina confessed that she was terribly afraid of speaking in front of people. Every time she tried to speak, someone would get angry at her, or worse, beat her severely, and no one came to her rescue. Lucina told Fuka that she wasn't afraid of him at all, which was why she spoke so freely with him. She then launched into a long story about her encounter with the red dragon she had healed when she was little. Just then, Hakan entered the tent, and Fuka disappeared, saying goodbye goodbye and see you next time to Lucina. Hakan was shocked to discover Lucina's red face covered in pimples. He called his knight Tulan to bring the doctor. Tulan was horrified by Lucina's face and took his king with him, saying that Lucina had smallpox. Very concerned about the dangerous situation they were in, Tulan yelled at Lucina not to approach as she tried to explain herself. Smallpox had been used as a weapon of war by the kingdom of Brian to annihilate the kingdom of Tyar. Hakan defended Lucina and gave her a chance to explain herself. In panic, Lucina tried to explain, but no one understood what she was saying. Her voice trembled as she attempted to articulate her thoughts, making her words incomprehensible. Desperate, Lucina lowered her arms and stopped speaking. She thought that anyway no one here would understand her situation. The crowd was shocked. Everyone demanded that Lucina be burned along with all the objects she had touched in order to protect their kingdom. Terrified by Hakan's troops' recommendations, Lucina wondered whether she should heal herself or not, even if it meant everyone would find out about her power. Hakan noticed the deep panic in Lucina, who could no longer express herself properly. He asked her to calm down and take her time to explain what she meant. Hakan was convinced that she did not have smallpox, as Tulan believed. He explained to Tulan that Lucina's symptoms had nothing to do with smallpox. Hakan turned back to Lucina and urged her to speak without fear, assuring her that no one would be angry with her. To the astonishment of those present, Hakan understood perfectly the fragments of Lucina's sentences. He realized that Lucina's mother had dyed her hair blonde to meet the beauty standards of the old king of Brian, to whom she was promised. It was this dye that caused her to have so many blemishes on her face. After understanding this, Tulan sheathed his weapon and the atmosphere became calm. Hakan replied to everyone that if Lucina truly had smallpox, then they would also need to burn him because he had touched and kissed her. Hakan adds that everyone who drank with him must also be burned just like him and Lucina. Upon hearing these words, the crowd responded in unison that they trusted their king's judgment and that Lucina did not have smallpox. Lucina was once again enchanted by this figure who was protecting her when no one else ever had. A moment later, a knight entered the tent to inform Hakan that the kidnappers confessed they were sent by Lucina's mother. Very angry, Hakan found it an affront he could not let pass as a king. He wanted to return immediately to Lucina's kingdom and burn everything left without exception. Lucina pleaded with him to spare the innocent population. Shocked by Lucina's request, Hakan asked if she was not concerned about him getting rid of her family. Lucina realized she had made a terrible mistake. Terrified, she fell to the ground and begged Hakan to spare her beloved family. Internally, Lucina thought she must not let anyone discover that she was not actually the biological daughter of the Baroness. Lucina had to pretend to care deeply for her family. This family that had always told her she was the child of a courtesan and that no one would want her as a wife. They even whispered for her to be grateful for being chosen to become the mistress of an old king. Very embarrassed and shocked, Hakan quickly helped Lucina up, asking her not to make herself so uncomfortable, especially since she was still unwell. With just his left arm, Hakan lifted Lucina into his arms as if she were as light as a feather. "If I spare them, what will you give me in return?" he whispered to her. Hakan told her he could not let those who tried to kidnap his wife go unpunished, so if he refrained from eliminating them at Lucina's request, he expected something in return from her. Lucina, confused, gave him an innocent reply and said she would do anything he wanted. Hakan was troubled by Lucina's resemblance to the girl who had cared for him years earlier while he was in dragon form. He confirmed whether Lucina was truly ready to do anything to save her family. She responded vigorously that she was. "In that case, kiss me," he said. Lucina turned red and was shocked by his request. Hakan insisted on wanting a sweet kiss from his wife. Lucina timidly approached Hakan and fulfilled his expectations with a gentle kiss, worthy of a romance film, making Hakan happier than ever. He embraced her and agreed to spare Lucina's family. In a threatening tone, Hakan ordered his knight to tell the dragons to behead the mercenaries sent by Lucina's mother. A clear message needed to be sent. He then demanded their heads be burned at Berg Castle in front of all the inhabitants while conveying his message. "If you touch my wife again, you will all meet the same fate as these men." The knight nodded and took his leave after Hakan asked him to prepare what was necessary for Lucina to regain her strength. Hakan brought Lucina to bed and told her to rest because they would only return to Tired after she regained her strength. Hakan added that he would stand guard outside the tent so she had nothing to fear. Lucina thanked him. Hakan teased her by asking for another kiss as thanks. Lucina jumped at Hakan's request for another kiss. Hakan laughed and told her it was a joke. Shocked, Lucina couldn't understand why Hakan was in such a good mood. She wondered if it was because of the kiss she had given him earlier. Lucina didn't understand this man who seemed happy after kissing a woman with so many ugly imperfections on her face. She found Hakan strange. A few days later, the delegation finally arrived at the palace of Tayard. Lucina was amazed by the dazzling beauty of this kingdom. In her kingdom of Brian, everyone believed in the myth that the inhabitants of Tayard were barbarians, living in huts and eating flying animals. As Lucina set foot on the ground, she felt dizzy. Hakan explained that the particular smell of Tayard could be overwhelming for a human and that she would need a little time to adjust. The people of Tayard warmly welcomed their king back among them. However, many wondered what a pimpled human was doing next to the king. The priestess bowed before the king and wanted to purify the newcomers with holy water, which frightened Lucina as she didn't understand what was happening. Hakan explained that according to Tayard customs, the welcome ceremony involves sprinkling holy water on newcomers after their travels abroad to ward off evil spirits. Lucina understood and allowed it to happen. She felt that the discomfort caused by her pimples had lessened thanks to the priestess's holy water. Lucina was still in awe of the beauty of the palace when footsteps were heard. A young woman rushed into Hakan's arms to welcome him. Lucina found her very beautiful. Her name was Garrett. Garrett glanced at Lucina and asked Hakan if she was some sort of war trophy, adding that she was horrible and dirty. Hakan introduced Lucina as his wife, which shocked Garrett, who thought she must have misunderstood. Hakan explained that he couldn't leave the queen's position vacant, so Lucina would become queen when she bore his child, as tradition dictated in Tayard. Garrett exclaimed that pus was oozing from Lucina's body. Hakan quickly glanced at Lucina and replied to Garrett not to worry, because it was just Lucina's hair dye running due to the priestess's holy water. Garrett, on edge, retorted that she wasn't worried about Lucina, but about him, the king. "Do you really think she can fulfill her duty like I did?" asked Garrett, pointing a finger at Lucina. Confused, Lucina didn't understand Garrett's words. Lucina asked Hakan what obligation Garrett was talking about. Hakan told her to go change and asked Garrett to assign a maid to Lucina. Outraged by the situation, Garrett ordered a maid named Titi to take Lucina to the small palace. Titi responded affirmatively, calling Garrett "my queen." Lucina then understood that Garrett was the widow of Hakan's brother, who had died 10 years ago on the battlefield. As she moved away from Hakan and Garrett, she thought they looked so close that they seemed like a couple. Titi took Lucina to her new home and introduced herself, saying that she would be at Lucina's service from that day forward. Lucina asked Titi if this room would be hers from now on, to which Titi replied yes. Titi insisted that her obligation was to bear a child in order to officially become the Queen of Tayard, thereby allowing her to enter the palace designated for the Queen of Tayard. Lucina asked Titi to bring her holy water from the priestess so she could get rid of the dye in her hair and, at the same time, the pimples on her face. As Titi left, Fuka entered Lucina's room in the form of a bird. He congratulated her for making the wise decision not to reveal her healing gift. Lucina warmly thanked Fuka for his advice and confided that she loved Tayard very much. She told him that she thought it would be much nicer to live in Tayard, especially since she would be well fed and no one had hit her since her marriage. Fuka asked if she wasn't afraid of having a child with Hakan. Lucina turned completely red, imagining the wedding night she would have to spend with Hakan, and panicked completely, asking Fuka not to talk about it anymore. Fuka disappeared as soon as he heard Titi's voice returning with clean towels for Lucina's bath with holy water. Meanwhile, Hakan was receiving news about the dragons they had sent to Brian to deliver his message to Lucina's mother. Tulan asked King Hakan if he was simply going to stop at threats while they had sent assassins to eliminate their young dragons. Tulan insisted that Brian deserved a greater punishment, especially since the King of Brian had killed his brother, the late king. Tulan insisted that if he did not react, Brian would take them for fools. Hakan replied angrily that he had no intention of letting them off easily, but needed to check something first. Hakan wanted to at least spare the girl who had saved his life 10 years ago. Tulan asked the king why he hadn't brought that girl with him. Such power would have been a real asset for Tayard. Hakan replied that it would have been ungrateful of him to kidnap a girl who had saved his life. Hakan then ordered Tulan to find this girl with silver hair and eyes, insisting that she should probably be a commoner or a peasant, given the scratches on her face at that time. Hakan also asked Tulan to verify if his wife Lucina was indeed the legitimate daughter of the Baroness, and to inquire about her childhood. Tulan replied that it was quite possible that the Baroness, as cunning as she was, had lied about Lucina's identity. Hakan told Tulan he could leave because he was going to take his bath. Tulan wanted to inform him that the hot spring was already occupied, but held back after some thought. Lucina fully immersed herself in the water basin and felt revitalized. The natural color of her hair had already returned, and she felt in great shape. Lucina heard footsteps and wondered who was coming. It was King Hakan in all his splendor. She hid, watching all red as her husband entered the basin with an elegance befitting a main character in a seductive manhwa. Lucina wondered what she should do. King Hakan heard a noise and commanded the intruder to show themselves. Lucina, very worried, still didn't know what to do, especially since she didn't want to reveal herself to Hakan in this situation. Angrily, Hakan wondered if this was yet another strategy by Tulan, who was doing everything possible to ensure the kingdom had an heir as soon as possible. Hakan was tired of the desperate attempts by the maidservants sent by Tulan to seduce him. Lucina decided to flee and plunged completely into the water, but Hakan quickly caught up with her. A scene worthy of a passionate romance unfolded before our eyes. Hakan was captivated by his graceful wife, who resembled more and more the girl who had saved his life. Before he could regain his composure, Lucina was already on her knees before him, pleading for him not to hurt her. Hakan reassured her by saying that he would not harm her and that no one in this palace would dare touch his wife. Hakan apologized for frightening her and asked her not to demean herself even in front of him, as she would become the queen of this palace. He added that given the situation, she was not at fault and therefore should not apologize so much. Lost in his thoughts, Hakan reflected that while Lucina resembled the girl who saved his life, their personalities were completely opposite. The king thought that this girl had not been afraid of a dragon, and if it were truly her, she would have taken care of herself to escape the situation where she was accused of having smallpox. Lucina wanted to leave, but Hakan stopped her and asked if she had finished her bath. She replied that she had. Hakan then suggested they go to their marital chamber, which completely shocked Lucina. He asked her if she was still afraid of him. A moment later, Titi was carefully styling her new mistress's hair, while telling her that she would be very loved by the king with her beautiful hair. Ah, Titi, who wouldn't want to have a Titi in their life? The other jealous maidservants, witnessing Titi warmly encouraging her mistress, remarked that Lucina was too thin and would likely not be able to spend even a single night with the king. Curious, Lucina wanted to know more. They told her that King Hakan kept his distance from girls because it was highly possible they would pass on after just one night with him. Lucina pressed for an explanation. They giggled, adding that none could withstand the greatness of the dragon tribe. Titi strongly encouraged her mistress and quickly led her away from those hags whose only purpose was to discourage Lucina. Ready for her wedding night, Lucina questioned what Hakan's behavior might be like. Hakan was completely enchanted by Lucina and expressed how beautiful he found her. Lucina, flustered, thought it was the first time someone had told her that. The atmosphere was very romantic, and Lucina's heart raced. Suddenly remembering the maidservant's words, Lucina feared she might not measure up. Hakan then turned away from her, surprising Lucina, who wondered if he was angry. Hakan told her he was not angry and asked if she wanted to return to her kingdom. Lucina replied no. She declared that her place was now by her husband's side and that she would fulfill her role as a wife to become the queen of Tayard. Hakan asked if she was ready to sacrifice for Tayard and for him because that was the role of the future queen of Tayard. She must prove her dedication to her new nation without any fear. Seeing Lucina's hesitation in responding, Hakan told her that he would only share the same room with her when she felt ready to fully assume the role of the future queen of Tayard. After this episode, Lucina became the subject of mockery within the kingdom, and everyone talked about the girl from Brian who had been neglected by the king on their wedding night. The palace maidservants even took pleasure in openly mocking her, while she could hear them quite well. They even mentioned the possibility that King Hakan might choose to marry his sister-in-law, Garrett, according to Tayard's widowhood traditions. These words shocked Lucina, as she wondered if it was true that Hakan had been madly in love with Garrett when he was young. Lucina had not seen Hakan since the evening he asked her if she could take on the role of Queen of Tayard. Titi reassured her by saying that the king was probably out of the castle and would likely come to visit her upon his return. Despite Titi's words, Lucina did not feel worthy in front of such a charismatic and beautiful woman like Garrett. Titi's sudden arrival in her room jolted her out of her dark thoughts. King Hakan was back at the castle, and Titi suggested they go greet him. Lucina rushed out of her room with Titi and ran into Garrett and her maids. Lucina wanted to greet Garrett, but the words coming out of her mouth were incomprehensible. This made Garrett laugh. who told her that she spoke like a fool and that it was no wonder the king didn't want to hear about her anymore. Grabbing her by the arm, Garrett added that she was too skinny to be the wife of a dragon and suggested she flee while there was still time. Curious, Lucina wanted to know why it was so dangerous for her to be the wife of a dragon. Garrett replied that Hakan hadn't explained everything about the risks she faced as a dragon's wife, probably because he could have ended things with her from the start. Ooh, Garrett dared to wipe her hands after touching Lucina. Damn it! Anyway, Lucina, confused, wondered what Hakan hadn't told her. Garrett explained that the Palace of Tyard was a tomb for women who ventured to become a dragon's wife, because very few of them could handle the energy of fire. The arrival of King Hakan interrupted the conversation between the two rivals. Garrett wished the king a good return, and Lucina did the same by mimicking her. Hakan noticed he had interrupted Garrett and Lucina's conversation. Garrett made it clear that she was just giving some advice to Lucina as an ex-queen, because it was impossible for her to talk with a human who couldn't even speak properly. Garrett bowed and asked for the king's permission to give him advice as well. She implied to King Hakan that it would be better for the good of the kingdom and its inhabitants to choose a woman worthy of becoming a dragon's wife, rather than a fragile and timid human like Lucina. The king thanked her for her advice and told her he would manage this matter on his own. Hakan called Lucina over to him and left with her. Hakan explained to Lucina that he had been very busy in recent days, which is why they hadn't been able to see each other. He asked how she was doing and if everything was going well at the palace. Lucina had thousands of questions running through her mind and didn't know where to start. She timidly asked him if she was really risking her life as Queen of Tyard. Hakan thought she must be troubled because of the ultimatum he had given her last time. King Hakan then replied that it was true and that he understood why she wouldn't want to take on this role given the circumstances that had made her his wife. The king added that he knew there was no difference for her between him and the old King of Bryan to whom she had been promised. Lucina grabbed his arm and told him he was different because he was the only one who took his time to listen to her speak until the end without getting angry at her. Hakan, surprised, asked if he was the first person who had listened to her speak until the end. She shyly nodded. Yes. Hakan retorted that she was Baron Berg's only daughter, so how could it be possible that she had been so neglected? Lucina didn't want to reveal that the current Baroness was not her biological mother, and told him it was due to the fact that she stuttered a lot. Hakan tenderly told her that if he had a daughter as beautiful as she was, he would take great care of her and listen to everything she had to say. The king added that he found her adorable, which made Lucina blush. Sometime later, a servant rushed up to the king to tell him that Adar had disappeared. Hakan apologized to Lucina and left to deal with this urgent situation. Lucina was admiring herself, thinking of her husband's sweet words that he found her adorable. Suddenly, she remembered Garrett's remarks and asked Titi what it meant to digest the energy of dragons. Titi, surprised that King Hakan had not yet been explicit about this topic with Lucina, wondered if she could afford to talk to her about it. Titi then replied to Lucina that it referred to the ability to give birth to a healthy dragon child. Lucina asked her about the complications related to childbirth, and Titi answered that the risks were even greater in the dragon tribe than among humans. Titi added that given the difficulties associated with giving birth to a dragon, any woman could claim the throne alongside the king as soon as she had given birth to the king's child. Titi used Garrett as an example, who came from a poor family but became queen after giving birth to a child of the previous king. Lucina, pleased, thought that if she gave birth to a child, it shouldn't be a problem if the truth came out about the Baroness who raised her not being her biological mother. Titi encouraged Lucina enthusiastically to become the Queen of Tyard and hurried off to find dresses that would showcase her beauty before the king. Meanwhile, King Hakan was at the bedside of his mother, Adar. Hakan sadly told Tulan that she had insisted on following him when he wanted to leave for Berg, because she feared he would participate in another war. His mother was surely afraid of losing the only son she had left. Adar, his mother, was admired by all after giving birth to 2 sons of the protective dragon and receiving the blessing of fire. Unfortunately, Hakan's brother's tragic departure drove her mad. Despite the years that passed, she refused to accept her son's disappearance. Thus, Riken had no farewell ceremony, and his body had been kept in the holy cave for 10 years now, because Adar believed her son would wake up one day. Back at the palace, Tulan hurriedly asked the king if he was not going to go to the secondary palace. Hakan made it clear that he was not in the mood. Tulan insisted that if Lucina did not please him, he should at least go see Garrett. Tulan began reminding the king that after losing his brother and father, he was the only one through whom the kingdom could have descendants of the protective dragon. Hakan told him he knew this well, and that's why he got married. Tulan shared rumors circulating about him neglecting his wife and insisted that he should behave like his late brother Raikan, who was always surrounded by women. Hakan yelled at him, asking if he wanted him to endanger all those girls' lives. King Hakan told him he was right. Raikan had a child with Garret, but before that, many girls had left this world just after one night with his brother because they could not withstand the energy of the protective dragon. Hakan firmly added to Tulan that he would never act like his brother. Tulan replied that it was a personal choice each of his brother's concubines made knowingly. These were mostly poor women from the lower class who aspired to have a child of the protective dragon to become queen. The king, furious, responded that this was false. Hakan himself had heard Raikan's true version. Most of these women had no say in their fate due to their fathers blinded by money. Raikan had clearly expressed to him the fear he could see in all those maidservants' eyes. Hakan added that the only one who was not afraid was Garret, and that's why his brother loved her more than anything in the world. Tulan suggested marrying Garret, since she had even proposed it herself. She was the best option according to Tulan, but Hakan could not bring himself to do so, given how much love his late brother had for Garret. The king made it clear to Tulan that it was impossible. Outraged, Tulan exclaimed that he should at least make an effort to get closer to Lucina, since he refused maidservants and even Garret. Hakan sighed and asked why their tribe should suffer so much just to have a child of the protective dragon. Tulan told him he knew very well that without the dragon tribe, Tayard would have already been conquered by neighbouring kingdoms that would make Tayard's inhabitants their slaves. Tulan added that in the eyes of Brian's humans, they were all just beasts or monsters. Thus, just as these humans once did for their young dragons, they would not hesitate to destroy half-human tribes. Currently, they did not dare come onto their territory because they feared the fire energy of the dragon tribe. Tulan told King Hakan that as he knew very well without the power of the protective dragon, it was impossible to protect their people. Seeing that King Hakan still hesitated in making a decision, Tulan insisted that he was the only one capable of ensuring their people's survival through his offspring and asked again for him to go see Lucina. "You must fulfill your obligation for Tayard," added Tulan. Hakan, looking serious, asked him, "And what if Lucina does not come out unscathed?" Tulan replied that he did not understand at all why Hakan cared so much about a human woman whom he married in a fit of anger after attacking Brian in revenge for what they did to Tayard's young dragons. The king told him he did not understand himself either. Internally, Hakan thought it might be because of her resemblance to the one who saved him long ago. Tulan added that compared to the risk she faced trying to become Queen of Tayard, Lucina stood a better chance of coming out unscathed if she were married to Brian's old king, whose concubines disappeared one by one. According to Tulan, Lucina's best option was to stay here, but urged Hakan, who did not believe too much in this, to let Lucina choose between these two options. Meanwhile, Lucina was ready to fall asleep when she heard Titi's voice yelling at her that King Hakan had come to see her. Lucina immediately prepared to welcome her husband. King Hakan asked Titi to make arrangements. Hakan approached Lucina and told her that she was even more sublime at that moment. Observing the beautiful face of his wife, Hakan asked Lucina if she was sad because he hadn't come to see her sooner and promised that he would come more often from now on. Completely enchanted by her husband, Lucina asked him to continue. While the readers and spectators were immersed in the atmosphere even more than the concerned parties, Hakan posed the million-dollar question, "Are you ready to do anything for Tayard and me?" Damn it! Lucina still didn't know the answer to that question, but wanted to know if Hakan really found her adorable. Hakan replied that she must be an adorable woman in everyone's eyes. Lucina then told him that no one had ever said those words to her before. Surprised, Hakan told her that the people of his kingdom Brian must be blind because he finds her so adorable. Suddenly, Lucina remembered what the maids had said, claiming that her husband Hakan's heart belonged to Garret. Lucina wondered what could have happened between Garret and Hakan. Pushing Hakan away, Lucina directly asked him, without restraint, if he found Garret as adorable and if he loved her. Shocked, Hakan didn't understand the situation and made it known. Lucina continued by letting him know about the rumours circulating regarding his potential marriage to Garret. Hakan told her that given what he was about to do, he thought it was obvious to know his point of view on the matter. The king asked Lucina not to pay attention to those rumours, but Lucina insisted, adding that he had been madly in love with Garret since childhood, which irritated the king. Hakan then told her that if she kept talking about Garret, he would leave. Frustrated, Lucina Lucina felt inferior compared to Garrett, whom she found more beautiful than herself. Lucina then asked Hakan if it was a lie when he told her he found her adorable. Damn it! I'll tell you right away, it's certainly not in this chapter that we'll have baby dragons. Lucina drove the point home even further and added that Hakan loved Garrett more than her. Out of himself, Hakan asked what was wrong with her. For him, it was a way for her to ask him to leave since she hadn't listened when he asked her to stop talking about Garrett. Exasperated, Hakan turned on his heels and left, telling Lucina that if she no longer wanted to be his partner, she should clearly tell him instead of annoying him. In the Queen's palace, one could hear the wicked laughter of the story's villains. Garrett had just learned news that delighted her. King Hakan had once again left Lucina's room, leaving her alone, and had not returned for days. The maids, proud of their investigations, revealed to Garrett that the human from Brian had once again rejected the king because she was afraid of him. Garrett chuckled and replied that King Hakan despises fearful people above all else and would soon lose interest in this human. Garrett thought the situation was complicated for her since Hakan had chosen his wife himself, but concluded that in the end she wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. The maids facing Garrett nodded and told her that soon King Hakan would realize she was the only one capable of becoming Queen of Tyard. The servants added that it would just take a little time for the king because he still felt guilty about his deceased brother. Garrett recalled young Hakan, who would turn red whenever Garrett's eyes were on him, and smiled, thinking it was just a matter of waiting for the king to come back to her. For Garrett, no one could ever take her place in the Queen's palace. Meanwhile, Lucina was feeling depressed because her husband had neglected her and no longer came to visit her. Lucina understood that everything that had happened was because she didn't know how to express herself and asked Titi for help. Titi, surprised, confirmed whether Lucina's wish was to learn how to speak. Lucina clarified that she wanted to learn how to put words in the right order when she spoke. Titi offered to practice with her, as the best way to improve quickly and effectively is to practice the language of Tyard a lot. Titi confessed to Lucina that she had also gone through this when she was learning the language of Tyard. Intrigued, Lucina asked her if she wasn't from Tyard. Titi replied that she was from Rwanda and had decided to come to Tard to work and earn enough for her sister's schooling. Thus began Lucina's learning journey, following Titi's guidance to better pronounce words. A few hours later, a maid entered Lucina's room to announce that the current Queen of Tyard, Garrett, wanted to see her, which surprised Lucina. She then went to the Queen's palace with Titi, who strongly encouraged her to curtsy to the Queen. Lucina asked Garrett why she had been summoned. Garrett replied that there would soon be a royal banquet and that she wanted to offer her a dress for the occasion. Titi was shocked by the Queen's gift, as it was a dress in mourning colours according to Tyard customs, and mentioned this to the Queen. Garrett, with an arrogant air, insisted that it was a gift from her, the Queen, to her mistress, so Lucina must accept this gift. Back in her room, Lucina tried on the dress. She looked like a widow for sure, and both women worried that this outfit would give the impression that Lucina wanted to remind the king that she was sad about losing her kingdom after King Hakan's attack. Lucina nervously wondered what she would do if Hakan asked her to return to her family. At that moment, Titi and Lucina were startled by a voice yelling at them that she was hungry. The two women turned and looked at the woman at the entrance of the room and did not know who she was. The lady asked Lucina if she was in mourning and rushed towards her to console her. Lucina told her it was just her dress for a banquet. Titi observed the intruder and thought she must have a higher status than that of a servant given her adornments, and noticed that she seemed mentally unstable. Titi explicitly asked her to introduce herself. The lady introduced herself as Rita and warmly told them that she would turn this dress into one of the wonders of the world if they offered her something to eat. Titi wondered if she was the former headmaid who served Queen Garrett before. Rita, seeing they weren't responding, rolled on the floor, screaming that she was hungry. Lucina asked Titi to bring her something to eat. In Queen Garrett's palace, it was announced that her mother-in-law Adar had disappeared again and might be at the secondary palace where Lucina resided. Garrett decided that she would bring her back herself. Adar stuffed herself like a child and was happy. She immediately began her sewing work under the mixed gazes of her two hosts. At the first snip of scissors, Lucina and Titi knew there was no turning back. Adar, very confident in herself, informed Lucina that the dress she was about to create would make the man she loved fall for her. Garrett, who had been watching the scene from outside the room, decided to let Adar have fun with Lucina and left. A few moments later, Titi pulled away the
the huge blanket that Lucina had put on after trying on Adar's dress. For Titi, this dress was much better than the one before Adar's alterations, but Lucina felt too embarrassed. The blanket flew away, revealing the wonderful dress completely redone.
The next day, the drums of the royal banquet echoed throughout the kingdom, and the festivities had already begun. King Hakan asked one of his servants where Lucina was. The servant replied that she had not yet arrived, and asked the king if he would like him to go fetch her. At that moment, Gareth arrived, and couldn't help but interject with her sharp tongue. Gareth told the king that Lucina did not wish to come, probably because she was afraid that the king would make another bold proposal to her. Hakan instructed his servant to tell Lucina that she could stay in her room if she did not want to participate in the banquet. Proud of her success, Gareth wanted to offer the king her most beautiful dance. It must be admitted that she looked remarkable in her lovely outfit. Gareth twirled and twirled, but it was not enough to captivate the king. Hakan was becoming increasingly irritated, especially with Tulan whispering sweet words about Gareth in his ear. Right in front of the banquet door, a very likely scene was unfolding. The guard at the banquet door prevented Lucina and Titi from entering, insisting that only those wearing clothes offered by the Queen of Tyard could enter. Well, he couldn't even help but blush at the sight of Lucina, thinking she would be ugly according to Gareth's words. The guard even dared to push Titi and her mistress, causing them to fall to the ground. His mission was to prevent Lucina from entering, so that King Hakan would focus solely on Gareth. Dejected, Titi could not hold back her tears, and found this situation absurd. At that moment, our favourite little elf entered the scene in the form of a bird. Fuka rushed towards the guard and sent him a cannonball worthy of a hunting bird. Meanwhile, at the banquet, King Hakan was lost in memories of his past with his brother Raikan, who compared Gareth to a poppy flower. Hakan asked his brother if he was indeed talking about the flower so fascinating that one can never escape it. Raikan, all emotional, confessed to Hakan that he wished to remain under the spell of this flower forever. Hakan drank in his brother's words like sacred water, almost idolizing him and wanting to live exactly as his brother did, to have the same wife and be king just like him. But after his brother's disappearance, he naturally believed it was because of all those wishes that he lost his only brother, and bitterly blamed himself for it. His brother's last words were to tell him how much he missed his wife Gareth. Everything happened so fast, he barely understood what was happening when he was already being asked to have a child with Gareth to ensure the stability of the kingdom. Hakan could not bring himself to marry his brother's widow, the woman beside whom his brother wished to be buried, because Raikan was strongly convinced that she loved him for who he was, and not for the throne. Hakan remembered his brother's words, wishing him to meet a woman who loved him for himself, and not for the throne she would have after their marriage. Hakan had pushed Gareth away at that time, and made it clear that she was not obliged to follow Tyard's traditions, because he would find his wife himself. But Gareth's words felt like a cold shower to him. Gareth confessed that she loved Raikan because he was king, and that she bore a child for the good of Tyard. But the person she had always loved was indeed him, Hakan. Shocked by Gareth's words, he no longer knew what to think of this situation. The memories of that time resurfaced and gave the king terrible migraines. Meanwhile, Fuka continued her attack to create a diversion so that Titi and Lucina could take advantage of it to enter the banquet hall. Tulan grew concerned about the king's health and asked him what was wrong. When Hakan opened his eyes, he saw a figure he would recognize among 1,000. His beautiful wife made her entrance into the banquet hall and looked more beautiful than ever. The two young married couples observed each other in silence, and their emotions were visible on their cheeks. Lucina walked towards King Hakan while recalling her training with Titi. She bowed gracefully, curtsying to the king and wishing him eternal happiness. Hakan was as surprised as everyone present by Lucina's poise and courage. At that moment, the guard who had previously barred them from entering the banquet hall burst in and apologized to Gareth for his failure. Gareth sternly rebuked him for allowing Lucina to enter, wearing an outfit other than the one she had provided. Although delighted, Hakan pointed out to Lucina that she was late. Sensing Lucina's confusion, Titi spoke up and explained to the king that they had encountered a problem on their way. Hakan noticed the injury on Lucina's hand and asked Titi to explain exactly what had happened. Titi eagerly recounted the details, including how the guard had pushed them under the pretext that Lucina's attire was not permitted. At these words, Gareth immediately slapped the guard, adding that it was indeed the dress she had gifted Lucina and that he should not have stopped her for it. The guard, though confused, quickly apologized to the queen and admitted his fault. Garret then turned to Hakan and also apologized, claiming the guard must have misunderstood her orders. She offered to deal with him herself, but Hakan dismissed this suggestion. The king asked Tulan for his sword, causing the atmosphere to grow increasingly tense as the guard realized his fate. Hakan pronounced his sentence. The guard had disregarded the queen's words, laid hands on the king's wife, disrespected the palace's masters, and insulted the kingdom of Tayard. For this, he deserved death. Garret did not utter a word in defense of the guard. Shocked by how events were unfolding, Lucina reassured Hakan that she was unharmed. Approaching her, Hakan declared that no one but him had the right to touch her in his kingdom. He added that as his wife, any insult to her was an insult to him as king. The guard fell to his knees, begging for mercy from Hakan and pleading with Queen Garret for help, claiming he had acted on her behalf. Embarrassed, Garret asked Hakan if it was possible to lessen the punishment so as not to ruin the festive mood. In a serious tone, Hakan asked Garret if she had ordered the guard to prevent Lucina from entering the banquet hall. Panicked and furious at how far Hakan was going for Lucina after neglecting her for days, Garret forced a smile and denied ever giving such an order. While Garret washed her hands of responsibility, the pale-faced guard on the ground watched in despair at his queen's blatant betrayal. To further distance herself, Garret urged Hakan to punish the guard as he saw fit, showcasing his greatness to the entire kingdom. Hakan instructed Lucina to close her eyes and cover her ears until he told her it was over. She obeyed, and Hakan swiftly executed the arrogant guard. While Tulan handled cleaning up the scene, Hakan carried Lucina in his arms and declared an end to the banquet. Hakan waited until they were far enough from the crowd and told Lucina that it was over. Lucina opened her eyes, and the king wondered if she would have been terrified to witness the earlier scene. Hakan then asked Lucina if everything that had happened had scared her. Lucina admitted that it had, but added that she was grateful to him because she knew he had done it all for her. Hakan smiled tenderly and apologized for neglecting her once again, despite his promise to visit her more often. The king was tormented by the thought of being rejected by Lucina again, or worse, having her asked to be sent back home. He did not want to be separated from her, and had chosen to avoid visiting her to prevent such a tragedy. Lucina, in turn, apologized for her inappropriate behavior and told him that she had wanted to apologize earlier, but feared angering him further with poorly chosen words. Hakan gently set his wife down and asked her once more if she wanted to proceed with their wedding night. He reassured her that he would not be upset if she chose not to do anything. Lucina replied that she wanted to stay with him, but wasn't yet sure if she could risk her life for him. She explained that she wished to get to know him better before making her decision, which surprised Hakan and made him burst into laughter. Hakan accepted her request and told her she was a wise and brave woman. He continued complimenting Lucina on her beauty, whispering sweet words in her ear. A romantic atmosphere settled between them, but Lucina remained composed and asked the king to talk with her that day. Hakan agreed and invited her to sit down. Feeling shy, Lucina took a sip for courage and asked the king his age. Hakan replied that he was 27 in human years and confirmed that she was 20. Lucina affirmed this and asked him what he liked. Hakan answered, "You," which angered Lucina as she realized he was teasing her. As the couple grew more comfortable, Hakan moved closer to Lucina and asked if she would play a game with him. The rules were simple. They would take turns asking each other questions, and whoever didn't want to answer could drink instead. Lucina agreed, and Hakan began by asking about her ideal type of man, whether he should be intelligent, muscular, wealthy, or gentle. Lost in thought, Lucina realized her husband already met all these criteria, but refused to admit he was her ideal man. Hakan accepted her silence, and Lucina then asked about his ideal type of woman, insisting he answer honestly without joking. Embarrassed, Hakan replied that his ideal woman would be someone unafraid of him, who loved him not because he was king, but for his true personality. Hakan then asked if she had always been so talkative, since she had been shy and quiet at first. He added that if he had known how well she could express herself, he would have discussed many things with her earlier. Lucina explained that she had trained with TT to improve because she wanted to talk with him. Surprised, Hakan praised his wife for working so hard to turn her weaknesses into strengths. Proud of Lucina's rapid growth, despite initially thinking of her as timid, Hakan wondered if she had always been brave but had changed due to mistreatment. He asked if any family members had abused her when she was young, or if she had tried to escape because of it. Shocked, Lucina didn't want him to know the truth about her dark past, and reminds him that it's her turn to ask a question. Lucina then asked what he thought of her. Hakan confessed that the more he looked at her, the more interested he became in her. He assured her he had no intention of harming her and moved closer, saying all he wanted was for her to become his queen and live by his side forever. Hakan returned the question, asking how Lucina felt about him. She admitted that honestly, she sometimes feared him, which made Hakan step back in surprise. But Lucina held on to him and added that it didn't mean she hated him. Rather, she now felt more comfortable around him. She confessed that she wanted to be the only person he shared such closeness with. Blushing at his wife's declarations, Hakan promised it would be so. He decided it was time for Lucina to know the truth about his feelings and the secret of the Dragon Protector's birth. He told her everything, but discovered she had already fallen asleep without hearing a word. Hakan gently settled Lucina comfortably and couldn't help but smile as he watched her sleep soundly. The next morning at Queen Garette's palace, gossipers were already gathering to inform Garette about the king's actions.